What do a speaking coach, a strategy consultant, and a nonverbal communication expert have in common? Sounds like the start of a bad joke, right? But honestly, it's all about finding out what people really do in their jobs. The stories, the struggles, the coffee breaks. The real stuff you won't find in a job.
Welcome to a space where we sit down with people from all kinds of careers, have a laugh, and dive into what makes their work meaningful. Whether you're looking to learn something new or just here for a good story, let us be your guide. I'm Jeff.
And I'm Charlie.
And let's get
casually.
Today, we're sitting with René. René, you're a trainer and a coach with 3 decades of experience. Coach before it was even cool. Who specialized in helping people develop and master the art of nonverbal communication. When we spoke, you told me that at first you saw that it was bullshit. But somehow you became convinced so much that you decided to teach it. As someone who's also teaching communication skills, mostly public speaking, I'm very, very interested in what you are doing. I'm very happy to be here with you today. Can you please start by telling us who you are and what you do and how you got to do what you do?
Wow. Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you, Charles, for having me in the first place. I really appreciate that. My name is Rene Deceuninck, indeed. Some people are struggling with saying, hey, what is your name? I said, just call me Bob. That's okay. So I love to have a laugh from time to time as well. But I am born and raised in Belgium. Lived in Belgium for many years, 18 years, and I went off to the armed forces. Stayed in the armed forces for 7 years. And then after the armed forces, came back to Belgium, and in 1995, I started my business. And I've been running it since, which is now 3 decades, 1995 till 2025, in the area of personal development. And it didn't start off right away, in a sense that I was bullied in school like crazy. I don't know if you can relate to this, but being bullied in school is not really a fun thing. However, when I turned 17, I said to myself, you know what, I'm going to prove myself to the world that I am a person, that I am somebody for something, that I am something that will create something that is of value. I had no idea what it was going to be, but hey, and the first thing I could think about is join the armed forces. And people told me, when I say people, I mean my direct environment. They said, hey, this is not for you. You're not going to make it. Who do you think you are? You're good for nothing. And I was convinced I was good for something. Anyway, I applied for the forces and I went to the Navy and I applied and I got in. And people said, wow, you're so lucky. And I said, yeah, sure. And had a great time in the Navy. And after a couple of months, I said, hey, I saw people walking around with stars and stripes. And I said, hey, man, if they can, I can. And I went home and told my friends and my environment and said, hey, Rene, this is not for you. You're not going to make it. You have to study for that. Who do you think you are? And I said, you know what, watch me, I'll show you. And I'm going to keep it clean here, but I mentioned also F off. And anyway, and I applied for the rank of officer in the armed forces to become an engineer in building bridges and roads and stuff. And applied and got in. And I said, wow, you're so lucky. And I said, yeah, sure, whatever. And then I saw people jumping out of airplanes, and I was like, this is my kind of thing. So I applied, and they said, hey, Rene, if I would be you, I would not be doing it. Ever had that question? Somebody says, hey, if I would be you. And I said, if I would be you, I wouldn't do that, because you're going to be dropped in war zone. You're going to get killed and rah, rah, rah. I said, you know what, watch me and I'll show you. And I applied anyway and got in. So before I knew it, I was jumping out of airplanes. It was an amazing thing. And one day I was sitting on my hiney in an airplane in C-130 Hercules, which is used for parachute jumping and stuff. But I was watching the pilot, and I was like, hey, if he can, I can. He has such an amazing job. I went home, told everybody, you know what, listen up. I'm going to become a pilot. And they said, René, forget it. You have to have the skills. You have to study. This is not for you, my friend. You're not going to make it. You know what my response was like, hey, you know what, buddy? Watch me. I'll show you. And applied. And surprisingly, I got in. And a year later, I was flying. And I was like, wait a minute. It's not about me. And it's not about what I did or how I did it. It's about if you want something in life, you can, but you have to pay a price for it. And I was like, okay. And after 7 years, I left the forces. I mean, like the forces was fun, it was good, but it was time for something different. And I left the forces to become a truck driver, a lorry driver. And I drove a truck for 4 years. And I visited the whole of Europe. And I saw the whole of Europe from behind the window of a truck. It was hard work. Believe me or not, it was super hard work. And that's why I have a lot of respect today, far more than ever before for truck drivers, because it's a very, very hard job. But after 4 years, I said, listen, this is not life. There's more to life than this. I made pretty good money in those days with truck driving. But then I started looking left and right and I started my own business. And that was the beginning of a journey that never ended until today. And I was invited to come back to your question, Jeffrey, about what is it that you do and how did you get there, is I was invited to a body language free session. And I was like, wait a minute. This is not for me, man. This is rubbish. This is for hippies. This is fluffy stuff, body language. Come on, forget it. That was my attitude, by the way, also at that time. And they convinced me and I went anyway. And it was an amazing time. And I loved it. And I was sitting at the tip of my chair listening to the person explaining about body language. And wow, this is amazing. And thank God I went, because today it's my bread and butter. And it is such an amazing, that was such an amazing discovery for me, that, you express with your body what you feel inside. And that's why you attract the people you attract on your daily basis. So whatever you feel inside, you will express with a certain energy, a certain vibration on a certain frequency. And that's why you attract what you attract. So if you want to attract different things, you have to change how you feel. How do you change how you feel? The rest is history. But that is a little bit, I don't know if that's, I mean, it's a long answer to a short question, but if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, it sounds to me like you've had everything in your career except for the kitchen sink. And so there are, I think, so many different parts that pull from your experience into this final culmination of, okay, what makes a person communicate the way that they do? And I'm a avid and passionate kind of student of communication, both interpersonal and working in kind of like mass communication as well. But the concept of nonverbal communication feels a little bit kind of abstract in the way that, we can understand with language what someone is trying to say. We can understand with symbols what someone is trying to convey. But when you try to transfer both of those at the same time via the natural like inclinations of a person and how they move and how they position themselves, it feels so difficult, right? Because if you're focusing on someone, just their face, there's already a ton of information coming in. You have to notice their posture. You have to notice their, maybe the way that they move, they walk, they interact with their environment. There's so much information coming in. I guess my question is, when you're looking at nonverbal communication, what's the first thing that you notice in a person? What's the first and ultimate like point of focus that then bleeds into the rest for you to start understanding how someone is maybe feeling or how they're trying to get something across, or just any point of communication? Where do you start?
It's a very good question, a very amazing statement I have to say, I have to admit, is that I will refer, going back to my own story again, is that I was applying for a job, I mean, many, many years ago. And I was in the middle of, I mean, it was a pretty amazing job in sales, selling trucks. And when you speak about selling trucks, a truck in euros, I don't know in dollars, but it's up, I think it's the same amount almost. A truck in those days was about in between 100,000 and 120,000 euros, which is in dollars almost the same, I guess. So that is a pretty neat product to sell on the market. And I was applying for a job as a salesperson. And I was in a room with the two owners of the trucking company and the sales manager. The sales manager had about, I think, 8, 9 salespeople underneath him. And they were chatting and chatting and chatting and chatting and chatting and chatting and chatting. And then all of a sudden they said to me, "Hey, mister, you don't speak that much." I said, "No, I don't." And I said, "Why?" I said, "The best speakers are the best listeners." And they said, "Thank you so much for this. You can leave." 3 days later, they said to me, "Hey, when can you start?" I said, "Excuse me?" I thought I lost it 3 days before because of my expression. And I said, "You were the first." I mean, a couple of weeks later, I said, "Hey, on what basis did you hire me?" Because there was 135 candidates. He says, "You came up with the right answer, but you did put us checkmate. We couldn't come up with anything anymore. So we said, hey, you can go home." I said, "Wow, that's incredible." But to come back to your question is that when you are a listener and not a speaker, you can absorb so much information. And that being said, if you are in a conversation, stop talking and start asking questions. Because when you ask questions, that gives you time to read body language. It gives you time to define if the person is honest, yes or no, if they're telling you a lie or not, based on the techniques of body language. It gives you time to prepare your next question based on the answers you get, etc., etc., etc. So instead of doing the talking, stop talking and start listening. That is so important. The three monkeys in Japan, they call it see no evil, talk no evil, and what was the other one? You know the three monkeys? Yeah.
Hear no
So
evil.
yeah, see no evil, speak no evil, and etc. And but when you do that in terms in a conversation in business or whatever conversation, you will find out so much information because the person that is speaking to you, answering your question, also gets so significant because they can do the talking. This is psychological thing. If you allow people to do the talking, they get significant. So this is all positive. So, and at the end of the day, if you had a conversation with somebody and you ask them plenty of questions, they will come up with so many answers with stories you can work with, but you can also read the body language. Now, to finalize this answer is that how do you learn to play the piano? Is by practicing, practicing, practicing. How do you learn how to drive the car? Practice, practice, practice. How do you make babies? Practice, practice, practice. If that makes sense. So yeah, it's all about, you learn it, then you practice it, and you get better by every freaking day. Yeah.
Wow. I would like to get more specific, that we have an idea of what you mean by body language. I expect that there is the reading the body language to try to understand something that's not being said. And I wonder if there is also controlling your own body language to give informations or to deceive.
So the first stage is to really take care of your body, is take care of who you surround yourself with, what do you eat and drink, what medication do you take. It has to make sense how you treat your body. That's in the first place, because how you feel is what you express, and it's that expression that will be pulled out there or send out there with a certain vibration and energy on a certain frequency. And that's why you attract certain people in your life. That's the first thing. So you have to take care of your own body language. by managing your body in a proper way and be aware of it as well. The second stage is to learn to read other people's body language. So why they say what they say, how they say it, and how do they move their body when they're saying certain things, to discover that. So once you discover your own body language, you discover the body language of somebody else, then the third stage is how do you moderate a conversation combining both of those body languages, right? So if I would express myself in a certain way, you will react in a certain way. I will come back to you in a certain way. For example, let me put it like this. A very short example. Our left eye is our emotional eye. Our right eye is a rational eye. So when my right eye is connected to my left brain, my left eye is connected to my right brain. So when I look at my left eye and your left eye, I will connect our emotional brains with each other. I will ask you an emotional question. The result out of that question will be far more higher if I connect my left eye with your left eye. If I have a rational question, I will connect my right eye to your right eye. That's how you moderate conversations. Once you start you start to know your own body language, you discover the body language of the other person, and then you start moderating conversations through using certain systems in body language. If that makes sense.
So I guess the question here is everyone's body language functionally the same, right? Because I think if there are unique systems that you have in place, unique kind of physical cues, do those carry over? Or is there like a universal body language, or is it more tailored to individual experiences, maybe even cultural differences? How does that? Because I'm imagining making eye contact with someone and kind of trying to decipher the difference between emotional and logical conversation. But if I'm in a conversation with someone who finds direct eye contact, rude, right, because of their cultural inclinations, what changes? So what is the difference between something like a concept of universal body language and the system that you're kind of proposing?
That's a very good question, in a sense that I've been traveling for the last 3 decades in 43 plus countries. And when I say 43 plus countries, different religions, different cultures, different food, different people, different, name it, they're different. And what I always advise people to do, and that's what I do myself as well, is when you go to another country, ask for the do's and the don'ts when you arrive in the country. If you didn't do your due diligence on Google or ChatGPT or whatever, go to the locals and say, listen, I am not from your country. I just arrived here. Are there any do's and don'ts in this country I should pay attention to? For example, I was in the Middle East, and in certain countries in the Middle East, you don't shake hands with ladies. You don't even touch their hand. In certain countries in the Middle East, you don't use alcohol. If you use alcohol, you go straight to jail. In certain countries, I mean, I can go on and on and on and give you a full list of all the countries I visited and all the do's and don'ts I experienced. The thing is, though, you have to ask the do's and the don'ts in the specific country. When I received a business card in Japan, they would give it like this. So they will bow their head. They will give it to you with both hands. I would accept it with both hands and bow my head as well. And these are things you have to respect. And there's so many, every culture has a different, I mean, body language is globally the same. However, as you mentioned, there's cultural differences for sure, but you have to ask them in the countries where you are or visiting and say, hey, listen, is there anything I should pay attention to? Okay. In certain countries, you don't talk about religion. You don't talk about politicians. You don't talk about, in certain countries, you have to respect the culture, and you'll have the time of your life when you do that. And I don't know if that's an answer to your question.
Yeah, and I guess I understand it a little bit more from like a cultural do's and don'ts from the language perspective. I guess my question is more, how do you account for the nonverbal? Because I think a lot of people can rightfully say, okay, well, we don't physically touch in a specific way, or we don't, for example, like I like the business card example, because in the United States, when you get a business card, you say, oh, okay, cool, and then you put it in your pocket. In Japan, you do that, but on top of all of that, you also have to look at the card. You physically have to inspect it. And that shows that you actually care about what that person is giving to you, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But those aren't things that generally come across in conversation. And I think that's where you make the big bucks, right? Is because you have an acuity to understand the nonverbal do's and don'ts when it comes to understanding and conversing, not just in a technical aspect, right? But in a understanding of the kind of cultural norm for how you do things. And so I guess my question, if I can rephrase it, is how do you bridge gaps when you don't even know that there are nonverbal cues that you are giving and or receiving that are different than what you're used to?
I got a very simple answer ready. You ask questions. By asking questions, you get answers. The mistake a lot of people make, they do the talking. And that's my advice for everybody on this planet. Stop doing the talking. Start asking questions. And by asking questions, you get all kinds of information. Let me give you a funny example, a super funny example. When I travel from London by car to Belgium to visit my family, so I would travel from London, go through the ferry, because I'm by car. I will take the ship, the boat, the ferry to France. In France, I will cross France, go to Belgium. But however, Britain, UK, United Kingdom is no longer with Europe, right? Brexit, they left Europe. So you have to go through customs. So when I arrive at customs, most of the time people, the officer would say, hey, where are you from? Where are you heading for? What's the purpose of your travel? And sometimes they ask me, and what do you do for a living? I said, sir, I teach body language in businesses. He says, wow, that's interesting. What is my body language telling you at this very moment? And I said, sir, you don't want to know. And they start laughing. One day there was a guy, he couldn't laugh at all. There was two police officers behind him laughing like crazy, and he was not really pleased with my answer. But anyway, and I also proceed and say, listen, when I say you don't want to know, is just be you, because that's the best body language. Don't fake it until you make it, because fake it until you make it is good for a short term, but not the long term. And if you are who you are and you be who you are, you will never fake it. So I said, just be you. That's the best body language you can produce. And I don't know, I mean, I understand your question, but the main thing to do is to have a conversation by asking questions. And I got people sometimes say to me, hey, Rene, you ask a lot of questions. Why? I say, well, that's a good question. Why would you ask me that question? Am I allowed to ask you questions? Because I'm very interested in you. But this is psychology you can learn, right? And it's not to be rude. It's not to be I shall say to dominate or anything. It's just like you want to have a conversation and get information. Okay. And when people say, "Hey, you ask a lot of questions," I say, "Of course, I'm asking a lot of questions because I'm super interested in you. Is that okay for you if you ask them more questions?" And they go like, "Oh yeah, sure." The people don't even realize that you're doing this because they get so significant because they can do the talking. But by asking questions, that's the best way to go through the whole process. So, yeah.
Wow, René, there is something very deep in this. Here we are with a guy who spent 3 decades teaching body language and who tells that the best body language is to be yourself. I wanted to ask you the question. I'm still gonna ask it because you never know. Maybe we'll get something more specific, or maybe a tip. I would like to ask you for one tip that could help most people. One tip that is small, is actionable, and that can make a difference for our listeners?
I think I will get back to the same answer: is ask questions, ask questions, ask questions, ask questions as much as you can, and then watch people's behavior. And it's very simple. If they say yes, but they nod no, and they said no, and I mean, you know what I mean, right? I mean, I've got people saying, "Hey, I love you so much," but they are nodding no. I don't know about you, but that doesn't make sense to me. Um, and open hands, closed hands. So when you have people who are in an interview, for example, and they have sweaty hands, they will have their hands on their thigh and go back and forward because they have sweaty hands. If you would shake that hand of that person in that very moment, you'll feel the sweat in their hands. The question is, why are they stressed out? Are they not confident? Do they have like certain things going on that doesn't make sense? Do they apply but they shouldn't apply? There's all kinds of questions you can ask yourself, but you also can ask those questions to the candidate. And you know what happens, what's curious is that when there's interviews and there's a glass top table, you should watch out, because that person knows about body language, because they want to know what's happening under the table. I will explain you why. What's happening under the table are the body parts, the further away from the brain, so the less controllable. So your feet will tell you far more than your hands or your head. So when you're in an interview, for people who are listening right now, and you go to an interview tomorrow or next week or whatever, and you apply for a job and there's a glass top table, pay attention, because people will watch, they will watch your feet, they will really pay attention to what's happening under the table. These are HR people who are specialized in body language as well. And why do they do that? Because they want to know everything about you. And when you have sweaty hands and you start rubbing your hands back and forward on your thigh, that means like you're nervous about something. Why are you nervous? Explain it to me. So yeah. So is there a tip to come back to your question, Jeffrey? Is there a tip or something? And I mean, ask questions and watch people far more intense than you did before in your life. And again, for example, if you say like this mirroring matching, I don't know if you ever heard about that mirroring matching. That means like I'm having a conversation with you, okay, and you have your arms crossed. I will cross my arms as well. I will copy paste you, and then you go like this. I will put my hand on my cheek. I will put my hand on my cheek. I will change again and again. I will copy paste you 5-6 times in a row. Before you change, I will change. And I guarantee you, you're going to copy paste me subconsciously. You're not aware of it. That means I can direct you in every single direction I want. Pay attention to two things. Do it in a very subtle way, because if people find out, you're screwed. And the second thing is do it for a positive reason, because karma will come back to you, right? And these are techniques and tips and tricks I can give away. I got like 1,000 tips. But the main tip I would give away here in conversations, make sure you moderate a conversation by asking questions. By asking questions, people will come up with a story with information you can work with. By asking questions, you will be able to define a lie versus a truth. By asking questions, you'll have information to prepare your next question. By asking questions, people will get so significant, they will love you. And you know what? When they leave the conversation, you know what they will say? That is the first person to understand me, and you didn't say a word.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yes. And I would add that you will learn. Because when you talk, you don't learn anything. But when you listen, you can learn a lot of things. And just for this, it's amazing. There's so many advantages to ask more questions. I always advise people to follow a curiosity-driven approach when they meet people. And I think, Charles, that you have the same approach when you network. Try to know what's interesting in the person you're talking to. But that being said, René, I would like to jump and to rebound on what you said about the sweaty hands, because this is something that I've been struggling with since I was a teenager. And for years, it was really, really hard for me. So of course, now it's a little bit better. But before I go on stage, or before a very unique and stressful events, yeah, I still have those sweaty hands. The thing that I'm doing now, because I realize that unfortunately, there don't seem to be any switch that I can just switch and not have sweaty hands. So what I do is, if I cannot control this, I still have control over everything else. So I might as well act and move as if my hands were perfectly dry. So I wonder if you would follow a similar approach. And more generally, it's what I advise people who speak on stage to be conscious of their body, and especially of all the moves that are stress based. Like, okay, I put my hands in my pockets. Would I do that if I weren't stressed? Or I go back and forth with my feet. Would I do that if I weren't stressed? And to remove all the moves that are coming from stress, to be as if the stress weren't there. I wonder if you have a similar approach here.
Well, I mean, I've been on stages in so many different countries, in so many different events. I got stages with 10 people in the room. I got stages with 10,000 people in the room. And it all comes down to the same thing. On stage, there's a certain amount of being nervous in the beginning. Believe it or not, my knees were shaking. My very first presentation, I guarantee you, I was ready to run away from the room. However, the more you do it, the better you become. And then I learned from some speakers backstage. I've shared some stages with a couple of pretty amazing people on this planet, and what I've learned from all of them is that first of all, know what you're talking about, right? Do know what you're talking about, and if you can't do a presentation without a PowerPoint, you're probably not ready. Even me in body language. I mean, most speakers, professional speakers, don't even have a PowerPoint, but they know what they're talking about. The reason I'm telling you this too is that I had an experience where electricity went down and there was still some light from outside, and I just could continue because I knew what I was talking about. I was so confident about my material, about my content, I didn't have to stop. But a lot of people, when they do public speaking, the only thing they have to rely on is their PowerPoint. It is good in the beginning, but try to train yourself into presentations without the PowerPoint. That's the first thing. The second thing is what I learned from most speakers that I shared stages with is that they all have a ritual before going on stage, which is breathing exercises. Some of them meditate, some of them pray. And I meditated a lot. I did breathing exercises, and I was speaking to the universe and said, universe, guide me in this process. I am teaching people content that will enhance their life, enhance their professional life, their personal life. I am just the delivery boy. Use me and give me the right content so I can enhance their life. I thank you, I thank you, and I thank you. A couple of breathing exercises. I jumped on stage. Sometimes I said things that I asked myself, where did that come from? But ask and you shall receive, as a speaker as well. So if you ask the universe for help and guidance while you're on stage, you will get it, believe it or not. So the preparation before you go on stage is breathing exercises, praying, meditation, whatever feels good for you, right? I was with with Joseph McClendon backstage. He would go on the trampoline backstage, trampolining to put up the energy, and then jump on stage from the trampoline. Whoa. So I saw things backstage from certain speakers. You won't believe me, but it's a ritual. You have to have your own ritual. Now, being on stage, you can be nervous, and I used to be nervous myself many years ago. Today, I don't notice anymore, but I used to be super nervous in those days. But what I learned as well is to use certain techniques when you're on stage, is the techniques about psychology. So when you're on the right side of the stage or on the left side of the stage, it makes a difference for the audience. So when you're on the left side of the stage for the audience, which is right, for you, the right side of the stage is left for the audience. Now, left is known to be negative. Right is known to be positive in the brain, that is. Okay. So when you are on the left side of the stage for you, right, for the audience, you start speaking about the beautiful life you had, the beautiful education with your parents that you had, the beautiful school you went to, all the beautiful experiences in life. And it was so fun, and we had holidays and blah, 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 blah. And then you move slowly to the right, and then you say, hey, listen, ladies and gentlemen, it didn't always go that way. We had our struggles. I was bullied in school. And you start speaking about your negative things, right? But you use your hand, because I remember you said, hey, I have my hands in my pocket. Don't keep your hands in your pocket. Even if you're not used to have your hands outside of your pocket, make sure you got a pen or a pointer or whatever, but don't put your hands in your pocket, right? Use your hands in terms of body language, right? You will enhance your communication or enforce the words you use by using your hands. So that being said, on the right side, you talk about all the things that went wrong in your life. On the left side, for you, that is, you talk about the positive things. And then slowly you move to the middle and you say, hey, listen, ladies and gentlemen, today we're not here to talk about me. We're talking about body language. How many of you are ready to get started? Raise your hand and say yes. That's what you said when you're in the middle. And then people go like, wow, he's just like me. The thing you have to have is an icebreaker where people can rely to you and say, hey, he's not different than us. So people will connect with you. You have to have that connection. People have to feel what you feel. And believe it or not, a lot of people in the audience got bullied. A lot of people had an amazing lifestyle when they were young. A lot of people get through the struggles of life. They're like you. So when they feel they are like you and you are like them, the rest is history. And then you can ask any question to your audience during your presentation. However, you have to use your body language. I ask you, I will turn like this, like left. I said, ask you an emotional, I'm exaggerating right now, right? But I'll turn to the right, so you see the left side of my body. I will ask you an emotional question. How many of you agree that 1, 2, 3, X, Y, Z? Raise your hand and say yes. I guarantee you 90% of the audience will raise their hand. And then I'll turn slightly to the left with my body, look with my right eye into the audience. And how many believe, or how many of you believe that 1, 2, 3, X, Y, Z? Raise your hand and say yes. 90% again will raise their hand. It's about using your body language in a certain way and certain systems and certain rituals that will make you a speaker. People will sit on the tip of their chair and say, wow, that's a speaker. That is content I will remember for the rest of my days. So long story to a short question.
Yes.
Yeah. And this is just, I mean, I do public speaking trainings, but this is in the big lines. I could go on and on and on, by the way, but hey, Charles, please, you had a question.
Well, you know, it's weird because I usually draw a lot of parallels between public speaking and networking, which, I mean, I like public speaking, and I'm a weird bird in that fact that I've always really liked getting in front of crowds and talking about things. But the more difficult part was always interpersonal for me. When you get me in front of a crowd, I can kind of forget about individual people and lose focus in a sense, because I'm speaking to multiple people, so I can switch from person to person, and it's fairly easy. But when you work on an interpersonal level, and it's just you and another person, and you're trying to gauge the effectiveness of what you're saying, how you're saying it, and the impact that you have with that, it's a much, much different experience. So, you know, we kind of covered the big kind of the one person with many, one person with one person, but in terms of like the communication for switching between people, kind of pulling your focus away from one person and then deriving it to the next. When it comes to body language, it seems like that's kind of like it feels like a mental reset, right? If you're in a room with a lot of people and you strike up a conversation with someone. It's going really great, and you can see they're moving with you and they're laughing with you, but the purpose is to meet multiple people at that event. So you say, okay, well, it was wonderful meeting you, and then you go to the next person and you try the same things and it doesn't work. And it's frustrating because you're thinking to yourself, like, okay, was that one person that I just met the only person in this room that's going to be interested in me, interested in the way that I phrase things, the way that I put things? Or am I just meeting with an asshole right now? And that is the only time that I have to worry about this. In terms of body language, it feels almost like a visceral effect on you, right? If I'm talking to someone and I'm having a really good time, I'm laughing, I'm patting their shoulder, and we're having a great time. But when and that carries over to the next person, which usually has a positive effect. But when it's the opposite, right? When I have someone and I'm having a really difficult conversation and they don't really want to be there, I find them boring or repulsive for some reason, and I'm just like, okay, I great meeting with you. I guess I have to go, and then I have to go to the next person. That I always find myself challenged because I feel like I enter the next conversation in a sense of I don't even want to be here anymore.
Yeah.
And it feels physically kind of evident to the other person. How
Yeah.
do you manage the changeover between those two? How would you, as someone who, specializes in the physical, how do you reset in an effective way?
That's a very good question and statement at the same time. I was in London I think it must have been 2015 or 16. And I was with Jack Canfield. And do you ever hear about Jack Canfield? Chicken soup for the soul and stuff, the concept. So yeah, and I had an amazing time. We had lunch together and we started talking about all kinds of things. And all of a sudden we went into the subject of levels of consciousness. And the subject of levels of consciousness is a very interesting subject. When you realize that 80% of society is living in a survival mode today, right? 80%. 80% of people are working hard, listening to television and radio on a constant basis, getting afraid of all kinds of things, and they're very like surviving life. Now, once you step out of that survival mode and you start looking into relationships, you start moving to the next level of consciousness. You start looking at your relationships, the relationships you have with your spouse, with your kids, with your friends, the hobby clubs you're in. What is the relationship that you have with those people? So you're at the next level of consciousness. So you no longer stay in that survival mode. You start expanding your brain. Now, once you are in that mode of relationships, you start like thinking about, hey, isn't it about time I start managing my life? And how do you manage your life? You look at your job, your finances, you look at your family, and you start structuring things. So you're no longer in the survival mode. You're no longer taking care of your relationships because that becomes a normal thing for you. You start managing your life. So you start growing and growing in levels of consciousness. Now, once you are managing your life in a proper way, you start influencing people. And as an influencer, people will look at you like, hey, man, this is great what he does. We can do that too because they have an amazing lifestyle. How do you do that? And you are an influencer. Now, from influencer, you become a mentor. And from a mentor, and you go on and on and on and on. And Jack Canfield said to me, if you're a single person, which is a little bit of a joke right now, but when you're single, when you are growing in levels of consciousness, there's less and less people. It's like a pyramid. There's less and less people. So when you are living life on a very high level of consciousness and you're single, there's less and less people available for you. We started having a laugh about it. But anyway, and when you become a mentor, you start inspiring people with your wisdom And that is the levels of consciousness that I talk about is people who live lower levels of consciousness act upon things, right? They react upon things. They have a reaction towards things. Where people live higher levels of consciousness, they take action in life. That's a big difference, right? You react upon things that are happening to you. Normally they happen for you, but they don't think like that. People at the lower levels of consciousness, with all due my respect, by the way. But when you start growing in levels of consciousness, you take action in life. Okay. Now, to come back to your question, Charles, is that when you're in a network event, and you're on the table, you're talking to somebody, and you can't get through to them. They're like square, right? Yes, no, yes, no. We all had that experience, right? When you're living life on a higher level of consciousness, you say, listen, that's a great guy. However, he's not really at my level yet. And I'll be polite and say, hey, thank you for your time. And yeah, I do understand, this and this and that and XYZ and 1, 2, 3. Hey, have a great evening. And if something comes up, or I'm here, I'm around and whatever, right? But leave that situation, go to the next. And when you have another conversation similar, go to the next and go to the next. But live life on a higher level of consciousness. And for those people who are listening right now, if you don't understand really the concept of levels of consciousness, go on the internet, search on ChatGPT, what is levels of consciousness. But the higher you go in those levels, the more successful, let's put it like this, the more successful people you meet in your life, the more you'll find out they live life on such a high level of consciousness, it blows your mind. But what is a level of consciousness? And that is something to really to go into. If you're in a network event and it doesn't really match right away, go to the next. And just, you shut it off, go to the next. Shut it off, go to the next. But always stay friendly and always ask questions. That's the best way to do it.
It seems that this question is something that we could make easily a whole episode because we barely scratched the surface. I have flashes of moments that I'm thinking about, and I wonder how it would fit with this theory of levels of consciousness. Sometimes you talk with people, you feel great, but then suddenly you talk with someone else, and you feel tired. How do you explain? Is it something that would be?
I will never get tired. I will say they're not at my level.
And so you would just switch instead of
switch.
staying and yeah.
You can't let influence you. Like, you can't let them influence you. You mean you listen, you absorb whatever you want to absorb. And then my internal question for me would be like, what's the ROI in this conversation? Right? And if there's no ROI, I will stay polite. I will always say, hey, thank you for your time. I really appreciate you. Hey, but have a great evening. And if there's something comes up, I'm around here. Let's have another chat then. All right. Hey, have a great night. Bye. And you leave. You go to the next. But make sure you have that level of consciousness of being polite, ask questions, and move on. You can't waste your time with people who don't want to spend time with you. I had a conversation with another coach backstage a couple of years ago, and it was about some people in your life will come into your life for a season and then they leave. And some people in your life are like rocket boosters. So you have a rocket and have rocket boosters, and the rocket boosters will boost the rocket up onto the sky. But at a certain level, those rocket boosters fall off because they're empty. Some people in your life are like rocket boosters. They will push you and then they will fall off. They're not meant to go where you are going. And there's nothing wrong with these people. And I love those people, but they're not meant to go where you go. And sometimes we get stuck in the thought pattern of like, yeah, but I lost my friends. They were friends, okay, but you have to move on. And if you don't want to move on, that's good too. But then don't complain about it. And that's what a lot of people do. If you want to move on, just move on. And people are not, some people will stick into your life for the rest of your days, for sure. But some people are just there for a season. That's it. and you have to accept it. And then you're talking to a person that is, I don't know if I can mention my age, but I've been through some stuff in life and traveled lots of countries, 43 plus countries. And believe me, some people came into my life for a season, and I still love them today. If they will call me and say, "Hey man, it's been a long time," but you have to move on. Okay. Does that make sense, Jeffrey? Is that an answer to your question?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Well, along this vein of growth and I guess personal development, Jeff and I started this podcast because we were enthralled by the idea of these lives that some people lead and the jobs that they have and kind of the background, and we think people are just so cool. And what I find fascinating about people is their capability to change. And so we decided that we didn't want to just create a showcase for people, because I mean that's useful and it's cool to see people's lives, but ultimately we want our listeners to be able to take something from. And so what we do is we ask our guests to really impart one thing that all of our listeners can take from this, and that's usually a skill. So Rene, what's one skill that someone can start developing right now that can help guide them towards their own growth? Maybe it's in the field of understanding, these complex physical uh, communications stratus, but maybe it's just something in terms of your own experience that got you to where you are. What's one skill that can make someone successful today?
I was asked to be a co-author in a book about my story. And today I'm writing my biography because I started writing and I couldn't believe. I mean, some people said, Rene, you should be 900 years old with all the things you did in your life. And, but the one book I co-authored with was a book called Unstoppable Courage. And no matter where you are in life, I had highs, I had depths, I got my struggles like everybody else, financial struggles, relationship struggles. I have 4 kids, I got 3 grandkids. I'm still not revealing my age, but I mean, but everybody has struggles in life. Everybody goes through highs and lows. And the one thing I would like to give away for people is body language is one thing for sure. You can learn it. You can, the more you learn it, the more you apply it, the more successful you will be in that area as well. But the one thing I would like to give away here is unstoppable courage. Never, ever, ever, ever quit. Because the result of quitting is 100%. It's not going to happen. And, if it wasn't for me and my unstoppable courage and people supporting me and pushing me, I will never be where I am today. And that's what I would say is, first of all, never quit. Apply unstoppable courage. Surround yourself with the right people. To give you an example, one story only, is in 1995, I bought my first book from Tony Robbins. It was called Notes from a Friend. Very tiny book. You can read it in less than 2 hours. And I said to myself, one day I will work with that guy. I mean, I will work with Robbins. I guarantee you there will be a day I'll do that. And I said that to my environment back home, and they said, Rene, you're such a big dreamer, man. Make sure you don't get into a depression or a disillusion or whatever because of your thought patterns and your fantasies. And I said, listen, it's going to happen anyway, whether you like it or not. And I had that unstoppable courage in me. And I said, I don't know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, but I am guaranteed it's going to happen. That was 1995. I got invited to a first Unleash the Power Within with Tony I can't remember, was it 2010 or 11? And I said, I'm not going. Are you out of your mind? 4 days. I lived in Belgium. I had to go to London, pay for my hotel, pay for my food. You have to eat anyway back home. But anyway, you have to, I mean, and then a ticket that was pretty expensive in those days. I was looking at a final cost of about 7,000 euros. I said, I'm not going to do that. I don't have the money. I don't have the time, blah, 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 blah. And I went anyway. How did I do it? That's a different story. But I went anyway. Thank God I did. Now, they had an organization called the Yes Group in Europe. And the Yes Group is a group that comes together every single month to keep that unleash the power within Tony Robbins, that energy high. Because after 3 months, most of the time, the energy goes down. And after 6 months, people say, hey, that Robbins thing, that doesn't work because you see what happened. And then because you don't keep the momentum high, right? So I went to one of those Yes Group meetings, and there was a Portuguese guy. And he did an amazing presentation that night in Brussels. I remember it like yesterday because today he's one of my best friends. And he said, after the meeting, we met up in the lounge of the hotel. He says, Rene, did you learn something? Was it interesting? I said, it was super interesting. Did I learn something? Wow, not really. We're in the same industry. But it was amazing to listen to you. Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate that. And he says, can I ask you a personal question? I said, you can ask me anything, man. He says, how many years have you been smoking? I said, wait a minute. How does he know? Because that day I didn't smoke because I was afraid people smelling that I was a smoker. I couldn't have that. So I didn't smoke that day. It was one of my worst days in my life as a smoker, one day of no smoking. That is. And I said, how do you know? He says, I can tell. The color of your skin. Da, 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 da. I said, I've been smoking for that many years. He says, what? He says, how long have you been trying to quit? I said, how do you know? Because you're right. I've been trying to quit for 6 months, but I guess the universe has a different journey for me, and I'm probably not going to quit smoking. He says that's the biggest BS I ever heard in my entire life. I said, excuse me? He says, you know what? Your history about the armed forces, your history about this and this and this, is all of this correct? Can you prove this? Do you have certificates? Can you? I said, why are you asking this? I said, yes, I can prove, but why? He says, I have an amazing opportunity for you. Right? There's only 8 people on the planet who have that opportunity. What you have fits perfectly in that profile. We're 8, today we're 7, 1 quit. You could be that person. I said, what do you have? What is it? He says, I can't tell you. I said, why? He says, it's for non-smokers only. I went ballistic. I was like, man. So that night I drove home from Brussels to my hometown, which was about a 2 hours and a half drive. I was smoking like a chimney. I was so nervous because I knew he had something. I knew it. I could feel it in my bones. So it took me 3 months. And after 3 months, I was standing back home. I had an amazing, beautiful house, almost you could call it a mansion with 3, 4 garages and cars and stuff. And I had it, whatever, name it, I had it. Horses and anyway. And I was watching that cigarette. I was smoking and I was watching the cigarette. And I thought to myself, man, don't take a decision, take the decision. And I threw it away and I called him and I said, hey, man, Ricardo, it's Rene from Belgium. He says, yeah, man, what's up? What's up, brother? I said, stop the brother thing, man. I just want to let you know I quit smoking. And his reply was, I don't believe you. I said, excuse me? I said, listen, buddy, you have to listen very carefully. When I take a decision, there's no way back. All right. So when I take that decision, it has been taken, period. He says, okay, I'll send you some information, look into it. And if you feel like this is for you, fill in the form, send it back to me. All right. You have a great day. And he put the phone down. And I was going to ask him, what do you have? I called him back. He didn't pick up his phone. I said, man, he is so annoying. And it took him, by the way, 14 days to send me that email. 14 days. So what happens? I get the email, and the subject of the email was application, personal bodyguard, Tony Robbins. I said, wait a minute. Wow. I mean, the whole process afterwards, I'm not going to share that here, but it was a lot. But I do know one thing for sure. 3 months later, I was on the road with them. And I do know for sure, 1995, I said one day I will work with him. That's the first story. The second story that comes right after it, after 2 years, I said, thank you, Mr. Robbins, for the opportunity. Thank you for this. Thank you for that. He says, thank you for your services, etc., etc. We exchanged some conversations, and I left. And then I was chasing the guys who were hiring Tony Robbins, because where do you go as a speaker? You go where they hire the big guys, right? So I was chasing that lady from that company for a year. And after a year, we met in Earl's Court in London. And I slept in my car because I had to choose. Either I put gas in the car or I book a hotel room. So I am one of those guys who have many stories about sleeping in your car, sleeping there, just to be able to pay for the fuel and stuff. So anyway, and I met with that lady in Earl's Court after a year, and I said, listen, with all due my respect, I have one question only. Are we in business or not? I've been chasing you for 1 full year, and I'm sick and tired of chasing you. And she looked at me. She says, don't move. I said, okay. She came back with her PA, and she says, hey, this is Rene. You take all of his information. He's our new speaker on board. I say, excuse me? And she turned to me, she says, you still want it, right? I said, of course I do. I mean, and that was the beginning of a new career, or a new change in my speaking career, because they asked me at the same time, hey, you have been working with Tony before? I said, yeah. And she says, you know a lot about, I said, of course, she said, would you like to represent him? I said, excuse me? She says, yeah, doing preview sessions all over the planet. I said, I'm in. The thing is, what I want to share, to come back to your question, Charles, is unstoppable courage and unstoppable belief. If you have something in your thinking, in your mind, and you want to achieve it, go fully forward, ask the universe for guidance, and sooner or later it's going to happen. But you have to strongly believe in it and make sure you put action to it. And still today, it was not a comfortable journey at all, but the results are amazing. And that's what I want to give away for people, is that if you have a dream, go freaking chase it and go for it, and never, ever, 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 ever quit. That's my advice, or my share, if that makes sense.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much, René. You gave us so much in this episode, and it's not even finished yet.
And this was only one story of many stories. I mean, back to you. Sorry.
I have 2 questions left to ask you. One is extremely stupid, but fortunately, the second one is very deep. I'm gonna start.
Why would you call it stupid? I mean, anyway, yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna start by the stupid one so that we can end the episode on a high note.
Okay.
The stupid question is, since you worked with Tony Robbins, I wonder how he is in the backstage when he talks with you. Is he also screaming, or does he talk normally?
He's a normal human being, just like you and me, living life on a super high level of consciousness. That's why I appreciate so much in him. He's been a mentor for me. He's been a guidance, a mentor my entire life, I might say. My last collaboration was in 2023, but still today, he's an amazing guy. And people ask me the same question what you just asked me, is he always like that? He is a human being living life on a very high level of consciousness, and that's what I appreciate in him so much. Does he shout backstage at all?
Thank you for having satisfied our curiosity. Now the second question. It's the question that we ask all of our guests.
Okay.
It's the magic microphone question. I'm gonna hand you a magic microphone, and it's magic because it allows you to speak to everyone on Earth of today, but even people who are not born yet. It's a way to deliver a universal message to everyone. And you have 2 minutes to give it. What would it be?
First of all, dream big. Dream big, and man, dream big and just chase your dreams. And make sure it doesn't become a fantasy. Make sure you're rational enough to make plans. Make sure that you, when you make plans, that you also involve the financial part of it. What the biggest mistake I made in my life is that I was a big dreamer, but I didn't think about the finances. In that case, I lost a lot of money. And so the moment I started realizing that if I want to chase my dreams, chasing your dream is an emotional thing, but make sure that the financials make sense as well, which is the rational part of it. So make sure you have a balance in your rational and emotional part of your brain, and make sure if you want to build a big dream to also surround yourself with the people who will motivate you, encourage you, and help you. There's nothing wrong with asking somebody for help. I asked few people for help in my life. There's a couple of very well-known speakers I asked for help in my life. And there's I will encourage you, if you want to achieve your dreams, surround yourself with the same with the high-end people, with high quality people, as Les Brown would say it. HQP is high quality people, and make sure to have a balance in your rational brain, your emotional brain, and be very humble. My humbleness has always brought me what I want to be. And in terms of body language, honesty is the best policy. And yeah, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
That's how I build my business. Yeah, and I had to learn it myself from other people as well. But I started the day I started surrounding myself with high quality people only. That's the day my life changed completely, and it has nothing to do with money. It has to do with levels of consciousness. It has to do with a balance between your rational, your emotional, your spiritual, your family. Your family is very important. Your health is very important. Take good care of your health, of your inner circle as well. The people you surround yourself directly, immediately with. Yeah.
So much interesting parts of not just like the physical component of what does body language mean, but really an inspiring story about how to keep finding what you want, keep going after what you desire. It's been a pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. If you made it this far, please make sure to like, subscribe, give us 5 stars, send this to a friend who maybe needs a little bit of a nudge to follow their dreams, or someone who you want to say, yeah, I know what leaning to the right means, what looking to the right means here. And make sure to catch us every Wednesday on Casually Pro with wonderful people like René, and even greater stories about doing what you love. Thank you all so much. We'll see you later. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care, guys. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.